Brian and I are getting over the same head cold, so we kind of sound the same today. My name's Jeremy Myers, Executive Director of the Christensen Center for Vocation. This is a series we've been doing for a while now with campus ministry where different members of the community get to share their vocation story or a vignette of their vocation story with us during chapel. We have 2 more coming up this academic year on Thursday. This is a switch. It usually happens on Tuesday. But next week, Thursday, April 18th, Ankita Deka will be sharing her story with us. So I encourage you to come. Also, Ankita was scheduled earlier in the year, but I think, that was the day we did the career exploration day, so we had to reschedule. So it'll be on a Thursday. And then Tuesday, April 23rd, will be a day when we recognize the students who have completed Christensen Scholars Program this year. Today, we get to hear from Kristen Chamberlain, who teaches in the Communication Studies, has a PhD in Communication Studies, which means she'll probably be a really good speaker, right? From North Dakota State University. She's been teaching a variety of courses here as part of the Department of Communication Studies, Film, and New Media since the fall of 2007. Kristen's particularly passionate about environmental communications and has identified as an environmentalist since 9th grade. She's also always ready to talk about media, favorite books, and cats, of course. So please welcome Kristen Chamberlain.
This talk will include only some of those things. I'm going to start out with a very brief selection from the book The Art of Noticing by Rob Walker. This book, I was introduced to this book by my friend and colleague Liz Wendland in the art department. If you've taken a class with Liz, maybe you have also been introduced to this book, but it's really about the value that comes from sort of paying attention to what we are experiencing. And so just briefly, from the introduction of this text, pay attention, Susan Sontag once advised a young audience. She was speaking of the creative process, but also of living. It's all about paying attention. It's all about taking in as much of what's out there as you can and not letting the excuses and the dreariness of some of the obligations you'll soon be incurring narrow your lives. Attention is vitality. It connects you with others. It makes you eager. Stay eager. To stay eager, to connect, to find interest in the everyday, to notice what everybody else overlooks. These are vital skills and noble goals. They speak to the difference between looking and seeing, between hearing and listening, between accepting what the world presents and noticing what matters to you. So as been mentioned, my name is Kristen Chamberlain. I have been very happy to have been a faculty member here in the Department of Communication Studies, Film and New Media, second longest department name on this campus, since 2007. So yes, this is my 17th year at Augsburg, and I love it here. So let's start off today. I have a question for you. Is anyone else in here familiar with the cinematic masterpiece, Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Oh, I thought I was going to have to give you homework, which would have been go watch that movie, but many of you are familiar with it, so I don't have to do that. In the movie, this is knowing this about me will probably, for those of you who know me, this is about to explain a lot about my personality. In the movie, Ferris famously says, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it." Now, for those of us who are familiar with the movie, we all know that, of course, he then skips school, picks up his bestie, forces said bestie to commit fraud so that they can get Ferris's girlfriend out of school. The fraud includes borrowing his bestie's dad's Ferrari, which they proceed to take downtown into Chicago for a day of adventure and hijinks. The story of my vocation doesn't include any of those things at all. Sorry to disappoint you. But it does include the importance of stopping, looking around, and thinking about the ways that you choose to spend your time. So I always knew that I was interested in communication and media. I have always loved visual media, especially television and movies. I've also always enjoyed speaking in front of others. I don't know. I gave my first public speech when I was in 7th grade. I joined the speech team in 8th grade and even won a state championship when I was in the 11th grade. When I started college, I thought I was going to be the next Katie Couric. Who knows who Katie Couric is? Right? She was like one of the first female news anchors for a primetime televised, like primetime news. I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a journalist. I'm gonna be an anchor. I'm gonna be on TV. Shortly after starting my first class on media writing, I realized that having to interview people for a living was a special kind of nightmare for me. Turns out I only like to talk if I don't have to talk to someone else. The desire to be a journalist was born from passion, but it was the passion of an analyst and an observer, not the passion of a professional. I already had my passion for my profession, I just hadn't noticed it yet. So in fact, I've only recently realized that my vocation has been a common thread throughout my entire life. When my kids were old enough to start Sunday school, I volunteered to teach my daughter's Sunday school class. I did that for several years. Then, right before the pandemic, the person who had been the director of the Sunday school stepped down. No one else volunteered to step into the role, so I said I would do it. For a while, I told myself that I did it because nobody else would. Nobody else had volunteered. But then I stopped to think about it, and I realized that I have been very happily avoiding volunteering for all kinds of things. I'm really happy to skip out on the Parent-Teacher Association. I do not volunteer for the church council. I will not help my friends move. I do not bring baked goods to events. I categorically refuse to cut any dessert. It's an important thing to know about me. And I have yet to sign up for scorekeeping for my daughter's lacrosse games. There's a lot of stuff that I do not feel compelled to volunteer for. But if someone was needed to step into a teaching role, I was at the front of the line. So basically, I was 40 years old when I noticed that I had been living out my vocation my entire life. And the fact that it happened as I was contemplating my choice to teach Sunday school provides a really nice circular tie back to my first teaching gig. When I was in high school, I volunteered to teach Vacation Bible School at my church. That year, we were setting up each room as a different city from the Bible. We colored huge printed backdrops. We created specific activities for each of our rooms that were themed around our assigned city. Mine was Damascus. The students would move from city to city, spending one of each of 5 days in each room. It was a ton of work, but it was also a ton of fun, and I did it for no pay. If this sounds like a situation that you might find yourself in, congratulations, you might be called to the profession of teaching. This was the first of many teaching situations I would find myself in over the next 2 decades, never noticing that all of these situations were connected by a common thread. So my mom was my high school English teacher. I'm from a really small town in North Dakota. I had 45 students in my graduating class. Anybody smaller? Nice. I grew up a teacher's kid, and for those of you who are from a small school, you know everybody. I grew up a teacher's kid in a school where everyone associated with me with my mom. People used to regularly ask me what we were doing in English class that day. I did not know. There was even one guy in the grade above me who used to call me Little Jane. So funny. So it's probably understandable that I wasn't super keen on following her career footsteps when I was in high school. Now, my mom knew she wanted to be a teacher when she was very young. She used to force all the kids in her neighborhood to play school. She was always the teacher, and she always assigned them actual schoolwork. When school started up again in the fall, those kids were probably the most prepared students at that school. She went on to college, she got her teaching degree, and she spent most of her career teaching high school English. I didn't start out with that same drive. As previously mentioned, I spent most of my early summers watching cartoons. However, I did continually find myself in teaching and mentoring roles. I taught Sunday school, I taught swimming lessons, I led study groups, I mentored incoming students on the yearbook committee and on the speech team. I spent a week as a summer camp counselor at speech camp. I probably got paid for that, but honestly, I don't remember. It was so fun, I would definitely do it again for free. All the while, I rejected the idea that I was going to become a teacher. My mom was a teacher. That was her vocation. And after spending all of my formative years watching her grade stacks of essays over Christmas break, I was adamantly against it being mine. Then during my third year of college, I had an epiphany. I realized, first, that the thought of getting a real job sounded horrible and scary, and I wanted to avoid it for as long as possible. And second, I loved college, and I wanted to keep going. This was the first time I had considered teaching as something that I could spend my life doing. So I applied to grad school in communication studies. It was not smooth sailing. I cried a lot during those first 2 years. Then when I finally got things figured out and I was starting to feel more confident, I was thrown off my game again. I vividly remember sitting with a visiting professor one evening at the Bison Turf, for those of you who are familiar with Fargo, North Dakota. He asked everyone what we wanted to do once we finished our PhDs. And like many of us around the table, I said I wanted to teach at a university. After we had all answered, he expressed his surprise that so many of us wanted to teach. A PhD is a research degree, he said. The clear but unspoken message was that I was pursuing my degree for the wrong reason. And I struggled with this. And I struggled with the idea that I might not be doing something meaningful. But I loved studying communication. And I loved studying and watching media. And I loved teaching about communication and media. I was constantly volunteering to TA a course or to teach an extra class. Eventually, I realized that getting my PhD was meaningful because it brought together the things that I had loved for most of my life. And it made it possible to earn money doing things that I loved while sharing those things with other people. I didn't teach swimming lessons because I loved swimming. And I didn't teach Vacation Bible study because I wanted to be a youth pastor. I didn't want to be a camp counselor either. I wanted to be a teacher. So, in the spirit of me standing here as a teacher, let's practice what I preach in Com 111, public speaking, and bring this speech to a close by referring back to the introduction. Life does move fast. If you don't stop to look around, you will probably miss something. Pay attention to how and where you decide to spend your time. You might be trying to tell yourself something. And if you can figure it out before you're 40, all the better.